Oh, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Phil. Well done, excellent. We're going to have a great day. My name's Phil Hartley. I have the honour of hosting today's session around AI. The future is now, a lovely 1970s motif, I do believe. Welcome all of you. Thank you for making the time, a particular session earlier in the morning. This is the sixth in our series, and this one's a very exciting one because it's all about AI, and we're going to have a gentleman called Brad Coughlin speak for about 45 minutes about how Amazon Web Services is delivering and using AI as a fundamental part of its business. Before we cut to the chase, you all got some food and drink. The exits are here, obviously, and also the toilets are right round by the lifts should you need them. A couple of things. Welcome to our board members, Rhonda and Wayne. Thank you for coming this morning. And also, is Chris Hartley here? Hello, Chris. I'm also a Hartley, and therefore we are fellow chasers of the deer. So welcome to you as well. Quick intro. I'll do a quick intro, about 5 minutes. We'll then move swiftly on to Brad, who'll speak for about 45 minutes. John DeMellis will just stand up quickly as our head of sales and just touch on a few things that are happening in our business, and then we'll close and we should be finished by 8:45. You're very welcome to stay longer if you wish. Most of us will be here, and I think, Brad, you're here till
9 o'clock.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to show you a quick video first. Good job. Thank you. I love that video. I love it for three reasons. One is it's quite powerful in the sense it's messaging, etc. So I like the way the beat of etc. The second thing is it's got like a Game of Thrones ending. So therefore you're all feeling like you're just galloping off, don't you, across some snow-covered hill. And the third thing is, do you think that Malcolm Turnbull at the moment was thinking of those first few words, ability, attitude, constraints, etc.? Because I think it's very relevant. In each of our brains, we have approximately 85 billion neurons. Each of those neurons has about 10,000 connections. Huge capacity and storage for information. Over our evolution, we've evolved the ability to capture and process vast stores of information, and from that ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, that is the basis of our intelligence. When we combine that intelligence with our communication capabilities, it has made us different from the other animals on this planet. Because of that intelligence and that communication, we have the capacity to deliver what we call original thought. If you can deliver original thought, you can imagine. If you can imagine, you can pretend, and if you can pretend, you can invent. So if you look around you, everything you're wearing, everything on the table has been invented by us, by something in our heads. You could argue that we were also invented by our parents, but we'll move on from that. We are now at a time where we have created artificially machines that can also learn, that can think, and now can also create. You can see it, go and reference it, music, art, and also some design components. The Airbus SE the cabins that were developed for the crew were designed by an artificially intelligent machine. So they did the thinking, it did the thinking, excuse me. AI can already do fantastic things for us as sapiens, from the simple chatbots that we all know and engage with on the phone occasionally, to the incredible changes you can sometimes see witnessed when you see people who've got augmented limbs, which are connected through some sort of a network to something in their mind. And you go, well, how did that work? The breadth of AI's adoption is huge, but I am the fluff guy, as you all know. The serious stuff comes from Brad, so I'm going to just give you some examples of some things I found, which I find fascinating. Barbie. Mattel are developing a Barbie doll, I believe it's going to be released in November, which has AI capabilities. It will listen to your child or your children's children. It will store that information, it will do some analysis, and it will respond. And it will start to communicate with your child. Now, I find this a little bit creepy, to be honest, because it means that you'll have a doll that can actually be part carer for your child. There's no reference at the moment, but I suspect they'll also allow parents to start to configure how that doll communicates. Don't know if we all want that, but that's one of the things that's happening. This one next I'm very proud of, because it comes from the UK. You can hear that in my voice. So, a company called donotpay.co.uk. When you get a parking ticket in the UK, you scan it, you send it in with a few of your details, and this site will automatically sift through all the local parking laws and the national parking laws, and then they'll send out a legal letter in your behalf to the parking authority rebutting the claim. It's 60% successful. Fantastic. You could say it's legal attention for all, isn't it? So it's brought the cost of legality down. Fantastic. In the US, there's an AI religion being developed by a guy called Anthony Lewandowski. AI is the god. There are robot priests and monks also being developed. It's just, whoa. But also there's some interesting things, and things that are very, very subtle, but also very important. AI is being used in some cases to tailor education for the specific needs of your or your children's brains. It is happening, or it is in the process of happening. You can look at this two ways. That's amazing, because that means people like me would have been trained to be rock stars, because that's what I was born for, right? Rather than this. But the other thing you've also got to think about is, does it decrease randomness, and therefore does it decrease diversity? And if it decreases diversity, does it actually therefore decrease invention? So I'm not sure about it. I'm just putting it out there. We all have access to AI, sort of our phones, home devices, such as Alexa, Google Home, and increasingly it's entering the workplace. Who here has Alexa or Google Home or something at home? Yeah. Okay. Most of us, I suspect, check out the weather. Most of us ask to tell us a joke, etc. But in time, those services will become much more important. And Brad will talk a little bit about what Alexa can do to show you what AI is doing at the moment. Well, that's all fun and dandy. That's all the interesting, that's all the fun stuff. But really, we've got to think about what is the purpose for AI. There were two things I saw on the BBC website literally last week. One was a gentleman who runs a company called Aganiti, and he was the CIO of this company. It is a leading exponent of using AI, and he was actually saying, well, you know what? For the last 10 years, it hasn't really moved very far. Nothing really very exciting about it. I'm not quite sure why he said it, but he did. And the next day, we had the Bank of England the chief economist of the Bank of England, Andy Halden, speak up and go, you know what? We're getting nervous. We're getting nervous it's going to replace jobs, that we're going to have the technology poor. That we'll have a greater shift in our society than we've seen since the Industrial Revolution. All these things are possible, but what I think we should do is now hear from Brad and about AWS, which is a company that's using AI at the very core of what it's doing. So it's a great pleasure that we have him here from Amazon Web Services. Brad has about 30 years' experience in information and communications technology. He's held a variety of roles, 11 years with Microsoft, joined AWS in 2013, and recently in May was appointed to the role of country manager for Australia, New Zealand and public sector at Amazon Web Services. So working with Brad, it's clear that he thrives on his employees. He loves working with customers, partners, and industry contacts. And he intersects that thinking big, getting stuff done, and he is a good man to be around. I've enjoyed his company. Brad will talk a little bit AWS to set up what it does. Then we'll also get into the innovation culture that's in AWS, which is also fascinating because that then transcends to how AI is being used. So that's sort of the cover he'll give. He talks a good talk, so hold on to your hats. Brad, would you like to come up, please?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the DB Results Breakfast, and thank you for allowing me to talk to you this morning. Three thoughts going through my mind at the moment as a result of Phil's intro. The first one is Barbies with artificial intelligence in my daughter's bedroom, or my son's bedroom for that matter. And where is the level set on the spectrum between creepy and cool? So my first thought is we control where and how we apply those sorts of things. The second one is the thought of Phil with long hair in the 80s with a guitar is just a mental image that I'm trying to shift, but I cannot.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's scary. It's going to be with you all day. The third one is a meme that one of my team members sent last night that said, that had a picture of someone with a smoke detector saying, change your Prime Minister, change your batteries. So three things that are revolving at the moment. In 1997, someone called Jeff Bezos publicly listed a company called Amazon.com, and he wrote a letter to the shareholders and said, we're going to create a company that will, at its very essence, start with the customer and work backwards. We will not be driven by the quarterly cadence of Wall Street and return on shareholders' equity. So if you are looking for those sorts of things, then we are likely to be misunderstood for a long time, and we are probably not the investment vehicle for you. And every year since then, over the last 20 years, he's produced a very similar shareholder letter, but a common theme in every one of the letters is that construct of starting with the customer and working backwards. So 10 years later, Amazon.com had built a very strong capability for building globally secure, reliable, cost-effective infrastructure that it used to host Amazon.com websites around the world so that people could quickly and securely search for the books that they wanted, select the books, purchase the books and have them delivered not too long afterwards. And customers started to say, you actually do the technology side of Amazon.com better than what we do, the technology side of our business. And our core competency is in airlines, banking, finance, utilities, retail, whatever the case may be. We don't actually see the design, build and run of data centers as a core competency. Is there a chance that you might spin off what you guys seem to do so well with your technology infrastructure and make that available as a service so that instead of us trying to solve that problem, we could just consume what you do? And by the way, if you do decide to do it, Jeff, could we actually dial it up and dial it down and only pay for what we use when we use it? And in 2006, Amazon Web Services was founded. So there's a guy called Andy Jassy who's the CEO, and since then, we have been delivering compute, storage, database, and 117 other services in 18 different regions around the world, covering 190 countries with millions of billing customers every month. But the key to it is it's on demand and it's pay as you go. So for those of you in the audience, and I know we have a number of utility companies, the ability to dial it up for as much as you want, for as long as you need it. But the moment that you don't, the ability to dial it down again and pay for what you use. So traditional technology problems around capacity planning start to disappear when you think about what that allows you to do. Because rather than trying to guess 5 years from now what your peak capacity will need to be, and then add a fudge factor to that, and then start procuring, designing, building and rolling out that technology and hoping that you get that mapping right, the ability to auto-scale that technology and pretty much map supply to demand as closely as possible gives you the ability to then divert some of the 80% of your spend that's devoted to keeping the lights on in IT to starting to drive innovation across your organisations. So there are two things that I get asked a lot about. Innovation at Amazon, and what do we build our culture of disruption on? And then today's topic around AI and robotics, and that spectrum between creepy and cool, and at the end of the day, it's a tool that we still decide how and where and why we want to apply. So on the first part, how does Amazon solve for innovation? It's not a secret sauce, and we do talk about it regularly in the public domain. So for those of you with a mathematical background, this is not a real formula. Please don't solve for this. But we humorously like to say that the function of innovation is about the way you organise multiplied by the architecture that you deploy on, raised to the power of the mechanisms that you have in the organisation multiplied by the culture. So we have 4 pillars. And you can use acronyms if you like: C for culture, M for mechanisms, O for organisation, A for architecture. You probably won't remember that. But if I get you excited and your blood pressure goes up, like you do when you have your coffee, you can remember MOCA, because MOCA is mechanisms, organisation, culture and architecture. And if you don't like this section and I put you to sleep, you can remember coma. So these are the 4 pillars that we drive a culture of innovation at Amazon. The first one is around culture. So later on today, Sarah will circulate an email to you with some follow-up information from this morning's session, and one of the attachments will be the 14 Amazon leadership principles. And these form part of the DNA of Amazon and Amazonians themselves. So we treat everyone in the organisation as a leader. We encourage people to invent and simplify. We encourage people to be right a lot, so we back gut instinct and would rather see a bias for action and a decision made and executed, because in the fullness of time there aren't too many things that we cannot unravel if we get it wrong. So one-way doors and two-way doors. Two-way doors make up most of our decisions, but if it's a one-way door and we can't come back, we'll spend more time, and I'll talk about a mechanism called a narrative in a minute. We spend a lot of time hiring and developing the best. I spend a lot of time talking to HR, culture, people management functions in our customer organisations. And they're surprised when I say an interview comprises 5 or 6 Amazonians, and each Amazonian will have 2 or 3 of those leadership principles. And we spend the majority of the 1-hour interview talking to the candidate about, give me an example of where you've recently demonstrated think big, where you've demonstrated bias for action, where you've demonstrated customer obsession, and we test against our leadership principles. We then have one person on the loop, excuse me, called a bar raiser. The bar raiser is the gatekeeper for the culture of Amazon. So they've usually been with the organisation for 3, 4, 5 years. They've usually done hundreds of interviews. And they look for 2 things above and beyond those 14 leadership principles. Is this person better than 50% of the people already in that role at that level? The second thing is this person a long-term proposition for Amazon? The first one makes sure that we are continually raising the bar, but because we believe that all boats rise on the same tide. The second one makes sure that we don't have someone who happens to interview really well, but in the long term will probably not work out to be a good proposition for Amazon. Frugality is sometimes misunderstood. It's not about being cheap and nasty. It's about making sure that if we invest things that make an impact for our customers, that don't make an impact for an employee. Everyone in Amazon flies economy, because it doesn't make a scrap of difference to a customer. But will we spend money on our services, on our technology, and our customer or our partner-facing events? Absolutely. The other thing is we believe frugality drives innovation. If you have a problem and you are cash rich, you can throw money at a problem. It won't necessarily solve it, but it feels good as it sort of drains out of your pocket. But if you don't have money and you need to supply some ingenuity or some necessity to the problem, it drives examples or solutions or outcomes that we may not have driven otherwise just by throwing money at the particular problem. We have a bias for action. We focus on delivering results. So I encourage you to have a look at the 14 leadership principles when they're circulated later today. So that's the first pillar of our culture of innovation at Amazon. The second one is mechanisms. Jeff Bezos says, good intentions don't deliver results. Mechanisms do. Repeatable patterns and practices that embed the culture of the organisation. This is the customer chair. When I joined Amazon almost 5 years ago, I did my induction in Seattle. Back then we were pretty small and a lot of the induction was done there. And I remember going into meeting rooms and there would be a different coloured chair, one different coloured chair in every meeting room. All the chairs would be black or brown and there'd be a red one or a yellow one or an Amazon orange one. And that was always the customer chair. And no one was allowed to sit in the customer chair. So even if you came to the meeting late and the only chair available was the customer chair, you went to the other meeting room and grabbed another black chair and brought it in. And in the meeting, people would point to the chair and say, but what will they think of that? Or, why is that good for them? And it was the freakiest thing when you've joined a new organisation to see people actively miming out the fact that there was a customer in that chair, and were we consciously thinking about this discussion in the context of how it would impact that particular person. We have other mechanisms. I mentioned a narrative earlier. Despite the evidence to the contrary behind me, Amazonians rarely use PowerPoint. It's usually in customer or partner-facing presentations. Internally, there are no PowerPoints. When we are looking at a business opportunity, a problem that we're trying to solve, a new service that we are looking to launch, we write a narrative, and a narrative is usually 6 pages long. It describes the problem or the situation that we are trying to solve for. It provides the background or the history to that particular subject. It goes through the range of options that we have considered and the data supporting those options that we're considering, and then makes a recommendation about which ones we think we should proceed with. Again, I did this during my induction. You walk into the meeting and they do not circulate the narrative until the start of the 1-hour meeting. And then for the next 15 to 20 minutes, everyone reads in silence. So everyone reads the narrative at exactly the same time. And then from the 20-minute mark onwards, the leader of the meeting checks that everyone has finished the document and the discussion starts. And for the next 30 minutes, people pull out particular items, debate topics. Did you consider this? Why that option? Why didn't you build on this, etc., etc. But by the end of the meeting, there's a consensus view on whether they adopt the recommendation of the paper or they seek more information to come back. Those mechanisms in many cases also include what we call a PR FAQ, a press release, and a list of frequently asked questions. When we're trying to envision the end product, the end solution, the end service, or what we're trying to solve for, we'll often write a press release and we'll fast forward and say, as a result of Amazon Web Services launching blah, blah, blah service, our customers are now able to do this in 50% less time than what they were in the past. The costs have been driven down like this, the security profile's gone up like this, and they've been able to attract a net new customer base in excess of 15% of what it was beforehand as a result of using this service, or whatever the context may be. And then we'll say, but here are 20 questions that customers will ask about that service, that feature, that product, that benefit, and we'll methodically provide a well-reasoned, well-thought-through answer to why that particular product or service makes sense for them. We find that mechanisms like that PR FAQ and that narrative enshrine the culture of customer obsession, or starting with customers and working backwards at Amazon. So that's the second pillar. The third one is in the way that we organise. We have a construct at Amazon called 2 pizza teams. And it's an American pizza, so you've all been to New York. It's the size of, I've never seen a dinner plate like it. But the idea is that if any team working on any particular problem, solution, outcome, service, opportunity takes more than 2 pizzas to feed, it's too big. And it's designed to make ourselves think about forming teams of 6 or 7 people, no more, that tackle a particular problem, a particular outcome, a particular opportunity. And if we have more than that, we'd rather separate them into 2 teams or 3 teams of 2 pizza teams and have multiple teams working on the same problem or the same challenge. every time we get bigger than 2 pizzas, the overhead of orchestrating, facilitating, collaborating, having everyone have their say during a meeting is an overhead that detracts from the ability to generate a great outcome. So you'll quite often hear 2 pizza teams mentioned in Amazon cultures as one of the ways that we organise. And the last thing is architecture. So the 4th pillar of our DNA of innovation is around our architecture. And this is where Amazon.com and all the companies across the Amazon group, whether it's devices, whether it's Kindle, whether it's Alexa and the Echo devices, all leverage the capabilities of Amazon Web Services. So on-demand computing, dial up, dial down, pay as you go, microservices based, so we get the units of code down to the smallest possible common denominator. Open it up through a series of what we call APIs, application programming interfaces, that make the code as open as it possibly can, so that we can connect to all those third-party applications and services that the app may need to consume, as well as all those things that may come down the track that we haven't yet envisioned. And we run that in an extremely agile environment that enables us to potentially implement features, changes, or new services, or new buttons, or new widgets into productions on average once every 90 seconds of every hour, of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year. So what's the secret sauce? What's the DNA of innovation at Amazon? It's really driven by those 4 things. The mocha of Amazon, or the coma of Amazon, depending on how you want to remember it. The second part of today's presentation is around AI and robotics. And again, with the introductory preface of, and whether we decide to use them for good or for evil. So I've got a couple of examples that I wanted to talk to you about today. Some of these are examples of where Amazon or Amazon Web Services ourselves have been using artificial intelligence, machine learning, or deep learning capabilities for many years now within our own organisations. And as those capabilities have matured, we've turned those into public-facing products or services. So we'll talk about how AI empowers Alexa and the Echo devices that you see on the left-hand side. We'll talk about how AI powers things like our recommendation engines. And if you go to Amazon.com and you select a particular book, people who bought this book also bought this particular book. We'll talk about how AI is integrating with robotics in our fulfillment centres, and how the Kiva Robots completely changed the way we thought about logistics within the fulfillment centres that we have across the world. And then in the middle there, I'll talk about some examples of how some of our customers are now applying AI to next generation thinking around solutions and applications. And this particular example we'll talk about is with Major League Baseball in the United States. So by way of definitions, you may hear these terms being interchanged. So artificial intelligence is a field of computer science that's dedicated to solving cognitive problems. Within that, machine learning is the name that's commonly applied to a number of techniques that are used for pattern recognition or personalisation. And within that, deep learning is a branch of machine learning where we layer algorithms to provide an even deeper understanding of what the machine learning is telling us. So while that sounds well and good, what does that mean in the real world? In terms of our use cases, when we think of machine learning, we think of services that allow you to do things like anomaly detection. This one's good, this one's good, this one's good, this one's good, that one doesn't look good. This one's good, this one's good, this one's good. Fraud detection. This is what a pattern of good credit card transaction behaviour looks like on Amazon.com. That's not. So if I see this pattern and I know that the precursor to that is this occurring, then can I predict when there is a greater chance rather than not that a fraudulent activity is likely to occur? Can I predict what customer churn looks like? With all our customers who've churned over the last 20 years, there's actually a correlation between that data point, and that data point. So if I see 2 of those 3 occurring, or I can see the 3rd just about to occur, is there a chance that more likely than not that customer is just about to churn out? And how can I personalise content recommendation engines, those sorts of things. Deep learning is things like image and video classification. Is this a person? Is this not a person? Is this a hot dog? Is this not a hot dog? Is this an animal or not an animal? Is that a car? Is that a motorcycle, or is it a mountain bike, or is it a racer? Speech recognition and the ability to convert speech to text or text to speech or any one of those combinations, and the recommendation engines that we talked about. So Amazon and Amazon Web Services particularly have spent a lot of time thinking about how do we democratize artificial intelligence? How do we make a lot of those capabilities available in such a way that they are no longer the domain of experts or PhDs, that they don't require supercomputer infrastructure to sort of design, build and run particular workloads, such that we can make them available so anyone from a one-person startup through to a global multinational organisation can start to build capabilities in that AI, machine learning, deep learning space. But using that same model that we talked about earlier, where you essentially dial up the AI capability that you want and run as much of it as you need for as long as you need it, but dial it down the moment that you don't need it and don't pay for it if you're not using it. So things like vision services, conversational chatbots, language services, or simple frameworks for building machine learning models. And then priming that marketplace, if you like, by building simple devices that enable you to embed a camera that is purpose-built for building artificial intelligence engines and machine learning models. So what does it look like? What was the proving ground for all this sort of thing? So let's take an Amazon fulfillment center as one of these examples. Has anyone ever gone to the US and done one of our fulfillment center tours? Okay, if you get a chance to do an executive briefing with Amazon or Amazon Web Services in Seattle, make sure you ask for a fulfillment center tour. These fulfillment centers are spread all across the world, predominantly in the US because that's where we first started building them, obviously. They are literally the size of 5 or 6 traditional soccer fields or rugby pitches. Imagine the size of that rectangular space and lay 4 or 5 or 6 of those end on end. And they're full of rows. And within each row there are bays, and within each of those bays there are shelves, and within each of those shelves there's an individual container that's uniquely identified that contains stuff that people are buying. And the traditional way we've approached those fulfillment centres has been thinking about it in the context of the picker. So the person who gets the order that says, Brad has ordered a Kindle Paperwhite device and 6 spark plugs. And using artificial intelligence, what's my optimal route for getting Brad to pick the Kindle out of this row and this shelf and the spark plugs that are up near Phil, and putting those, and then taking them back to my picking station, putting them in the box, sealing the box, putting the delivery instructions, throwing it on the conveyor belt, out to the truck and off to the customer. We spent a lot of time optimizing for that. And then we realized that there was one constraint that we could no longer optimize for, the time that it took for the picker to move from the picking station to the bucket to 1 item, 2 items, 3 items, 4 items and back. So we started to experiment with, should we arrange the shelves along the lines of Pareto's law? 80% of customers will probably ask for 20% of our items, so can we bring those 20% of the items closer? Then we flipped the entire model on its head, discovered a company called Kiva, started to implement it in prototypes and started the fulfillment centers, liked the technology so much we bought the company a couple of years ago. The Kiva Robots flipped the model on its head. They're about 1 metre by 1 metre square. They have a hydraulic lift in the middle that has the ability to lift one of those entire bays 4 to 5 centimetres off the ground. They can rotate in 360 degrees. They're autonomous. They're controlled by artificial intelligence. We can route hundreds of these around the entire fulfillment centre where all they do is pick up the shelf and they now bring the shelf to the picker. The picker's told what the next shelf is moving in front of them. They need to grab the Kindle Paperwhite and the spark plugs out of that one. The shelf then moves on. They fulfill the order. It goes in the box and then the next bay moves along. Let's have a look at how that looks. So you see the shelf moving along. You'll see the picker seeing the next item they need to pick and what the location is. They'll grab 2 of those items. Then she'll look up at the screen, she'll hit the button that says 2. The shelf moves on. We also do it at a much larger scale. So we've got robots that move entire pallets and take the pallet and move them onto the particular pallet bay that will later be deconstructed and turned into all those buckets of all those individual items that we saw. Look at the size of the fulfillment centre in the background. So they're our Kiva robots in action, but completely flipping the paradigm that once we solve for all the constraints and we could no longer solve for the time it took for the picker to get to the bay, we flipped the model and started to bring the bay to the picker. Amazon Echo is another example of artificial intelligence in action at AWS. We've been playing with these voice-enabled devices long before we released Echo, or Alexa, as many of you may know her. She now comes in a range of form factors, from large, medium and small hockey puck-sized devices. You now find Alexa embedded in some third-party objects. For those of you who've got Sonos speakers, you can buy a Sonos One now, and the same microphone array and the Sonos speaker work together so that you can ask your Sonos speaker, Alexa, play Dire Straits in the lounge room. And Alexa will interpret what that means, but the Sonos speakers that are located in the lounge room will play the music that's selected. There's also an Echo Spot down the bottom right-hand side here. Another form factor that has a screen and a camera built into it. So I installed one at my mum and dad's place in Albury. So they're in their 80s, and technology, as much as I love FaceTime, they still don't get, because the iPad and the thumbprint won't recognise, and where did I put it, and I've deleted that icon and all that sort of stuff. I can just say, Alexa, drop in on mum and dad. And Alexa knows that mum and dad equals that device located on their kitchen bench in Howlong in New South Wales. It chimes and then it lights up and my face is on the screen, or my kids' face is on the screen, or their face is on the screen. They talk to it without having to understand the technology behind it. And we've finally got to the point where they can say, Alexa, drop in on Brad and Ingrid, and it lights up the phone or the Echo Spot at our end, and they can have a conversation with us and their grandkids. But there's lots of other things that Alexa can do now. Third parties, customers, partners, organisations are building what we call Alexa skills. You can name your skill and you can say, Alexa, ask skill name for something. And there's almost 40,000 skills that have been built over the course of the last couple of years. I can ask Alexa, what are your deals? Alexa knows that that means go and have a look at Brad's Amazon.com.au account. What's Brad been surfing recently but has not purchased? And if any of those items are currently on sale or there's some sort of deal, I'll tell you what those deals are. Alexa, run away mode. Did anyone know that Alexa had away mode? I only discovered it last weekend when I was doing a little bit more research for this. You know how we go out on a Saturday night and we like to make the place look like someone's home so that we don't get burgled, and we leave a light on and we might turn a stereo on or something like that. I'm showing my age now. You can say, Alexa, run away mode. And Alexa says, I am just about to fire up away mode. And then this random conversation comes up on your Alexa device and sounds like our kitchen on any Saturday night where our extended family comes over. And this babbling conversation takes place. People laugh every now and again, and that will play on a continuous track until I come home and say, Alexa, stop. Alexa, wake me up to 80s music at 7 a.m. She knows that I want the alarm set for 7 a.m, but she also knows that I want to wake up to music, and I want that music to be from a 1980s genre. In the US, there's a service called Kayak. Kayak is a travel service, a bit like a Webjet or a Zulu. Alexa, ask Kayak where I can go for $500. And then the Kayak skill is smart enough to just ask iterative questions off the back of that. When did you want to go, Brad? This weekend. There are specials going to Adelaide on Saturday and Perth on Sunday. Which one would you like? And I can say, what's available on Friday night? There are $200 return trips to Sydney available on Friday night. There are flights available at 7 p.m. or 8:30 p.m. Which one would you prefer? 8:30 p.m. The flight is with Qantas. The details of this, would you like me to go ahead and book it? Yes. And we'll book that particular trip for me. Alexa, make a donation in the US. There's a whole range of registered US charities. Well, Alexa then says, do you want to make a donation to American Red Cross or the American Cancer Association? Alexa even understands the two things that only Phil and I understand in this room. Play Dire Straits in the lounge room. My kids still don't know what that means. Alexa, open Wine Finder, and Wine Finder will ask you, what meal are you cooking? We're cooking a shoulder of lamb, there's some balsamic, there's some pomegranate, and then Wine Finder will recommend the sort of wines that would go best with that particular meal. Alexa, open Domino's and place my easy order. Domino's is the name of the Alexa skill that's been built by Domino's Pizza. Alexa also knows that easy order is my standard order with Domino's, so automatically orders a large with a lot and a medium-sized Hawaiian for the kids. Alexa, drop in on Grandma and Grandpa, the one that we discussed earlier. Alexa, start my 7-minute workout. She knows what a 7-minute workout is, interrupts me at each of the intervals to change exercises and plays music in between. There's a skill called Opening Bell that does stock quotes from the US. But rather than having to know the code of Microsoft, MSFT, or Amazon, AMZN, I can just use English-like terms. Alexa, ask Opening Bell for Apple. Alexa, ask Opening Bell for Google. Alexa, how do I make a Manhattan? Who remembers how to make a Manhattan? I never do. You're coming to my next dinner party. And some hotels now are putting Alexa Echo devices in every hotel room. And their customers can say, Alexa, ask room service to order me a club sandwich. So all the intelligence behind Alexa, the devices fairly much remain the same. We obviously introduced new form factors, but the capabilities that were in the Echo that I bought 2 years ago are pretty much the same as the capabilities that we launched today. But Alexa gets smarter and becomes more intuitive and becomes more tailored to my requirements because the machine learning takes place in the cloud at the back end. And that same artificial intelligence underpins the recommendation engines. I was doing some surfing for one of those DeLonghi Latissima Plus Touch Nespresso machines. And down the bottom I noticed it said, recommended based on this. Do you also need a drawer for your Nespresso capsules? And if you thought about buying some descaler for when it eventually clogs up and you need to descale the machine. Or I may be surfing for books. So on this particular topic, and you've seen those recommendation engines where people who bought this also bought this item. All those recommendation engines are driven by artificial intelligence. Also with permission, if there's a cookie installed there, it'll remember all my searches that I've done on amazon.com.au but haven't transacted. And just bring up my browsing history on amazon.com.au each time I log in, just to remind me of what were the last 10 things or so that I was surfing. So artificial intelligence also finds its way into Prime Air. Has anyone seen Prime Air or heard about the Amazon drones? This is a pilot, thank you, that we launched. This particular one I'll show you is in Cambridgeshire in the UK in late 2016. So it's using a drone, working with the civil aviation authorities to make sure we get clearances, that they understand the algorithms for how we avoid collisions so that we don't run into trees, we don't run into people, we don't run into aircraft, we don't run into other Amazon drones that might be in the area. And we can essentially load small packages, so up to 5 pounds or 2.2 kilos. And we can fly the drones anywhere between 0 and 400 feet, so 130, 140 metres or so, and get them from point A to point B with customers. And we're using this to drive some of our thinking about how do we offer Prime Now in remote areas. Prime Now is the service where you can order a small subset of Amazon.com items, and we guarantee to deliver them within 2 hours. But you can't do that in London. If you have a fulfillment centre here and a house that's only 10 miles away, and yet knowing the traffic congestion there, there's no way we'll get a traditional van to deliver that inside that 2-hour window. So this is an example of the actual pilot that we ran in Cambridgeshire in December 2016. And this is Richard, who's ordering his Amazon Fire TV stick and some popcorn for his microwave.
Customers will choose from a selection of thousands of items tucked away in a prime era fulfillment center located just over the horizon from their homes. We have been operating fulfillment centers for quite a while now, but this one is unlike all the rest. These modest-looking buildings contain innovative prime air technology. Here's how it works. Moments after receiving the order, an electrically powered Amazon drone makes its way down an automated track and then rises into the sky with the customer's package on board. These drones are autonomous. From takeoff to landing and return, they operate completely on their own. Cruising quietly below 400 feet, carrying packages up to 5 pounds, and guided by GPS, our systems are designed to find their destinations safely. Within 30 minutes of placing the order, the customer receives their package. For this initial trial, customers can choose from the latest tech gadgets to their dog's favorite biscuits. We will use the data gathered during this beta test and the feedback provided by customers to expand the private trial to more customers over time. We're starting with 2 customers now, and in the coming months, we'll offer
So there's our Amazon Prime Air drones being driven by artificial intelligence. The other place where we've been trialling artificial intelligence for a long time is in our customer support centres. So ever since Amazon.com launched, you've had the ability to call a 1-300 number in the US and talk to an operator and essentially talk about the problem you may have with your selection, your payment, your delivery, the quality of the goods when they arrive. We've been using artificial intelligence behind the scenes on this for almost 8 years now. And we've got it to the point now where we, through the deep learning models, at some 15 years worth of electronic transaction histories, these customers buying these particular items over this period of time. And these are the subset where we continue to get customer support calls. So 2 reasons we do that. One, we learn from that. So if we've got a product that has a common defect, we have an and-on chord type capability that enables anyone in the customer support chain on a product that we think we've got a problem with to immediately remove the button that says buy this. So click once here to buy. We can remove that automatically. Secondly, we're using the machine learning model to preempt what we think the incoming call is going to be about. So assuming we've got calling line identifier enabled and we know that that phone number is attached to Brad's record, it'll pre-populate the call center operator's screen with not only my details, but the history of the last 90 days worth of transactions. It will then try and preempt which one of those I'm likely to be talking to the operator about, and it will preload the customer support officer's script about what we're going to do to resolve that situation. And because we start with the customer and work backwards, we usually apologize, and we usually offer to either return their money without question or offer them a new product at no cost to them, where we'll cover the delivery at no question, or offer them a substitute. And if there's a small delta in the price, we'll cover the delta in the price to make sure that they're satisfied with the transaction. We've got the AI engines to the point where now in 80% of the cases with the incoming calls, we're able to correctly preempt what the nature of the conversation will be about. So imagine what that does for your call centers, not only in terms of efficiencies, but in terms of your customer service levels, when you actually preempt what they want to talk to you about and you're on the front foot with regard to resolving it. We also use artificial intelligence capabilities in services on the Amazon Web Services side of our organisation as well. So this is a service called Macy that we launched that trawls your Amazon Web Services virtual private cloud, so your data centre that you've built on the Amazon cloud, let's say. And it looks for particular patterns or anomalies. It looks for something that might be a 16-digit credit card in open text, or a date of birth in open text, or a passport number in open text, and immediately flags those for resolution, and with the right sort of rules can automatically encrypt or temporarily hash some of that data to avoid potential breaches of security or potential leaks of data that we don't want to get out. But many of our customers are also using our AI capabilities. Artfinder launched a service in the UK a couple of years ago so that average punters like me could buy art without knowing anything about art. And it brings up a whole series of images and asks me to click on which ones I like and which ones I don't like. Based on me doing that over and over again, it then starts to build up a profile of, okay, Brad likes portraits and Brad doesn't like landscapes. Brad likes things that are photorealistic, he doesn't like things that are really abstract. And then every time you go onto the site, it will tune what it displays to you or what it offers to you based on your preferences, and the preferences get better and better and smarter over time. Their sales went up 70% after 2 years by putting artificial intelligence behind which particular products they do and don't offer to their customers. Ivy Tech College in the top right-hand corner uses artificial intelligence to monitor the results of first-year students at their college and to detect anomalies that could be pre-indicators of their results trending downwards. And then rather than waiting to the end of year one to intervene, it intervenes after that first exam and says, hey, notice that in that particular engineering exam you weren't really good on hydraulics. Here's some recommended reading on hydraulics, or here's a couple of tutors who are available in the hydraulics area, or here's a couple of sessions that we're doing repeats of that particular video of the lecture on hydraulics from week 6, and start to positively, push content to those customers, those students. FINRA monitors 37 billion transactions on the US stock markets every day looking for fraudulent activity or insider trading. Arizona State University now offers one of those small echo dots, the one that looked like a hockey puck, to their third-year engineering students who not only use it to say, Alexa, ask ASU when my next lecture is. Alexa, ask ASU what's on this Friday night. Alexa,
Ask ASU when our football team is playing. Social Sentinel is monitoring high schools for social computing activity that may be a pre-indicator of bullying across their campus. Formula One are now ingesting 43 years worth of data and looking to use artificial intelligence to start to predict the outcomes of races. Similarly, MLBAM, Major League Baseball Advanced Media. So let's have a look at them in particular and what they're doing. Major League Baseball started working with Amazon Web Services about 3 years ago, using production technology that was in the mainstream at that particular point in time. On the left-hand side of your screens in the bottom left-hand corner, 2 stereoscopic cameras mounted either side, up in the bleachers, behind the catcher's mound, focusing down on the field. And by combining the feeds from those, the ability to monitor everything that's moving on the field in real time. Second piece of technology right next to it is a radar. Not that different to the radar that we see the Australian Open tennis every year at Rod Laver Arena, where they measure the speed of the serve. This one's measuring the speed of the ball from the pitcher to the batter. By combining those and using artificial intelligence, they were enabled to produce a whole series of stats that they initially fed through to the broadcasters. So just inside the broadcast box, a whole lot of stats about that particular hit. The ball left the bat at 88 miles per hour. The launch angle was 24.1 degrees. It travelled for a total distance of 304 feet, and it was hanging in the air for exactly 4 seconds. So the broadcasters initially used this to enrich the quality of their commentary. Major League Baseball soon realised it was onto a winner, and it wasn't just about engaging the broadcasters, it was about engaging the fan base and making baseball a better experience for fans, and making baseball a stickier sport than whatever the other competing sports were at the time, basketball or soccer or those sort of things. So let's have a look at what Major League Baseball did.
We're very committed to the fan and getting that fan what they want and when they want it. To do that, we need next generation technology and we need partners that know how to innovate. When we looked at who was going to help us power StatCast, there was only one clear choice, and it had to be AWS. I'm Joe Inzerillo. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Major League Baseball. A lot of people wonder what MLBAM is. What we really are is the digital arm of Major League Baseball. And so when people think of things like At-Bat or MLB.com, we're the company behind it that actually powers it. We've always wondered about things in baseball. And one of the things we've always wondered is player positions and how they affect the game and the dynamics with the ball. So for example, what's the reaction time of a shortstop? Did he go the right direction? Did he take the right route to get there? StatCast and player tracking were designed to really give the fans the insight, to give them the ability to see things that would be previously unseen. What would professional sports be without slow motion instant replay? Just wouldn't be as exciting. We think this is the next generation of that, the ability to actually see data occur in real time and be able to judge it and compare it in real time is a real insight into the game that is going to be just as impactful over time as slow motion was. What StatCast is really about is giving people empirical information to power that conversation in the bar, which is a huge part of what sports is. And ultimately, people are fans of players, they're fans of teams, and they want to be able to say why their team is better or their player is better than the next. Stat?
So it's Major League Baseball. So rather than rest on their laurels, where do they go next? They're now starting to look at our artificial intelligence service, and they're ingesting 143 years worth of manual baseball game statistics. When was the last time this team played this team? At this particular stadium, under these particular weather conditions, and when it was the bottom of the ninth, and this particular pitcher was last on the mound, pitching to this particular batter, and they were 2-0, so 2 strikes down, no balls. They use artificial intelligence to determine the probability of what the next pitch will be. So StatCast AI thinks the next ball is going to be a fastball or a curveball. And they're feeding that through to the broadcasters now. When they mature that, they'll start to feed that through to the fans. Formula One is doing the same thing. They're ingesting 65 years worth of Formula One statistics. And the last time Ferrari and Mercedes, with 10 laps to go, were on this circuit in these weather conditions, and Ferrari was ahead, Mercedes pitted and changed to slicks, and we think there's a 72% chance that that'll happen within the next 3 laps of this race, those sorts of capabilities. In closing, where do we go next? Where's the creepy cool? Where's the, are we going to use it for good or are we going to use it for evil? Is it destroying jobs? Will we be out of a job in the next couple of months? Will my kids have a job to go to? So the World Economic Forum has thought about these sort of things and talks about, in fact, it thinks that AI and robotics creates more jobs. It talks about cities increasingly competing against each other for the war on top talent. It talks about the majority of the US workforce right now, 37% of people are in roles that they describe as freelancing, and more than 50% of people in the US will be in freelancing roles in less than 10 years' time. It also talks about education breaking out of silos. You'll no longer go to university to do a degree in law or a degree in engineering or a degree in liberal arts. That those degrees will increasingly intertwine as we build students who graduate with capabilities across that whole STEAM gamut: science, technology, engineering, arts, maths, and the other practical skills they're going to need in the workforce to survive. Forbes talks about, on average, the economy destroys a lot of low productivity jobs, but it typically replaces them with higher productivity jobs. And Deloitte recently talked about technology creating more jobs than it destroys. Even in The Australian 2 days ago, there was a profile on what IT automation is doing in the local industry here, and whether the number of jobs that we see now is going to increase or decrease going forward, in this case, increasing. The last one I'll leave you with, this came from the World Economic Forum again, but they were repurposing some data from Glassdoor, and it was talking about work-life balance, and are these the world's best job? And I know the data's a tad out of date, but there were 2 things I took away from this. More than half of the jobs that they mentioned there as being rated in the top 25 by way of work-life balance are technology-related roles. The other thing I took away from it when I showed it to my dad was almost 10 or 11 of those roles my dad had never heard of. So they didn't exist 1 generation ago. I said to my dad, what's an SEO manager? And he thought it was a state electoral officer because he'd worked as a casual worker on elections. It's a search engine optimization manager. So I think the future is rosy. I don't think we go into it blindly. I think artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, deep learning are tools that are at our fingertips. I think human beings still decide how and where we apply those tools. And I think although they may automate low skill or high volume work that we don't typically want to throw labour at these days, we still make the decisions about how and where we apply those in those augmented roles that Deloitte talks about. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you enjoy the rest of your morning. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest. Thanks, Phil.
Excellent. I noticed there's no rock star up there, so should have been. Does anyone got any questions for Brad?
Yep.
When's the voice training going to be available in Australia?
I don't know. I don't know. I can find out.
You know, the whole thing about the artificial intelligence, and it's a great device, but it reacts to everyone in my family, and I want it to just pay attention to it.
Oh, okay. You want to? That would be selfish mode. I'll ask.
The device with the screen, does that have like can that sense presence?
No. So it only activates the camera when you say drop in. It also has a privacy mode on top, so you can press a button on top of that spot device and a red ring goes around where you normally see Alexa light up with a blue ring when you talk to her. When the red ring is on, both the camera and the microphones are disabled, so privacy mode. Leave me your card afterwards and I'll find out about the timing for the voice capabilities.
Any other questions?
So Brad, algorithmic bias. So learning.
You realise I'm a country manager and I'm not technical, don't you?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I'm not going to put you under too much pressure.
You lost me with the first two words.
Hey Brad.
Just so I'm level setting. Yeah, hey Brad. And I went downhill from there. Algorithmic bias.
Yeah, so machine learning, deep learning actually has to be engineered, it's programmed in by humans, and that we actually have unconscious bias that we don't know about, and that it shows up when we actually start looking at pattern recognition and stuff like that. So putting those heuristics and learning laws into machinery means that it's going to run a lot quicker, which means we end up with a racist, misogynistic chatbot that Microsoft had to pull really quickly.
Quite potentially.
So what are the types of protections that you think are going to be required when we start bringing those in? Because the speed of adoption and deployment of AI, and particularly with machine and deep learning, I think is going to speed up.
Yep.
So we'll be facing an ethical and moral peer review type thing that's going to be required in AI.
Yep. I think there's no substitute for starting with the customer and working backwards. My second premise is I think there's no substitute for testing. So I think the more we test and the more we trial and the broader the use case and the broader the target audience is during that testing phase, the more likely it is that we'll sort of carve out those sort of anomalies or those sort of unconscious biases and filter them out before it goes into production. I don't think it's going to be perfect, and I think we'll still continue to find examples where it works and it doesn't work. We use artificial intelligence behind Salesforce within Amazon at the moment. And some of the heuristics it comes up with where it determines whether someone is a top lead or not a top lead, you look at the algorithm and then you look at the particular customer record and you think, how is that happening? And some of it we can deduct by working backwards and some of it that we cannot. I don't think we've solved it yet. I think we've solved it in some areas, but some of those examples that I showed you, like the fulfillment centres and the call centres, we've been baking that for 8 to 10 years. So I'm not saying that deploying these sort of capabilities in your organisations is similarly going to take 8 to 10 years, but it's one of those good versus evil, cool versus creepy examples where human beings need to not only train the models, but test the models to make sure that in the real world they're going to provide the sort of outcomes that we anticipate and not like those Microsoft ones that they clearly didn't anticipate. I think someone over here.
It's spooky, just the extent to which these devices can learn about ourselves. How do you maintain community trust? I mean, you're one breach away from losing an entire business.
We are.
How do you manage that risk?
So I suppose we reinforce constantly that security is job one for us. Literally, our business lives or dies on our track record over the last hour or two. And if we were to have a major security breach that had global ramifications, we'd have the potential to lose a large proportion of our customer base overnight, which means that you put a lot of resources, a lot of time and a lot of energy into the security and privacy implications. We also, secondly, spend a lot of time with our customers talking about a shared responsibility model. So where does Amazon or Amazon Web Services responsibility start and stop? And where does the customer continue to have responsibility? So we talk about from the dirt up to the hypervisor, that we have the responsibility. But if a customer deploys an application or an operating system, they still need to patch it, they still need to manage it, maintain it, secure it, put a firewall around it. And the privacy obligations can't be abrogated. You can't push them down to the third party and say, well, Amazon, you're now responsible for my compliance with the Australian privacy principles or some of those things. So our job is to provide more protections and more fine-grained controls than anyone else in the industry so that you can minutely tune the security and privacy profile of the workload to the particular use case and the particular risk associated with it, but then open up those that don't necessarily require all those controls. So the more we start with our customer and work backwards, the more you'll continue to see us put 90% of our changes into our new services, our new features, our new attributes based on feedback from customers, not on some roadmap that we have up on the wall that tells you what we think we're going to do next.
Thanks, Brad. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll close the questions there. Brad will be here till 9, so if you'd like to have a conversation afterwards, please do. Please give me a round of applause, because that was brilliant.
Thank you.
Real quick, when I was 8 years old, my father took me to go to see a steelworks in the UK. I was gobsmacked by going to a steelworks, the heat, the intensity, the power. It was the size of it. I was in absolute awe of it. When I started to look at what AWS is doing and then had a conversation with Brad, I got that familiar feeling back in my head. Mind you, I'm very emotionally open, so there you go. I'd like now to introduce young John DeMellis to come and just give a quick status update on DB results for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we will close. Thanks, John.
I hope that clap was fulfilled because it wasn't warranted for me. Thank you all. Brad, yesterday I put in an order for 3 Kiva Robots. Kivas. Good thing I can't remember what I ordered.
What for?
In order to pick up my 3 children and walk them through the stations in the morning, breakfast, bathroom, clothes and car. I discussed it last night with my wife and we're going to cancel that order. She prefers the robotic arm with a claw just to move them. It's a little bit more, less passive, so thank you for that. And hopefully you're all enjoying the Digital Insights Breakfast series. The Digital Insights really are here to inform, challenge and inspire for you to do more innovative things within your own businesses. We trialled the AI service for Amazon. We built a audience satisfaction meter for this breakfast, and the team really wanted to deploy it, and then they told me I was speaking, so I killed that idea. So, you know, you can dial these sorts of solutions up pretty quickly. We built it using OutSystems, which is our low-code platform, build applications in a couple of days to do proof of concepts and deploy them to any device. And the services, face recognition services for AWS. And that really just reads your face, says whether you're happy or sad, created a trend line, the trend didn't go my direction. So the app exists though, we can come bring it out and show it to you if you like.